Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is, well, I guess it's still morning. It is morning. It's time for our Tuesday keynote, and we are very thrilled to have Gwynne Shotwell here with us. She was one of the folks that got tied up in this whole Delta debacle yesterday. So she was going to come in nice and early and get a little bit of sleep last night, but she ended up not getting in until pretty early this morning. But she's here, and she's smiling, and she's telling good stories to me back in the back. So that's good. Now, yesterday I mentioned the great support that we received from Utah State University, and that is true, and it's greatly appreciated. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the great support that we received from the Space Dynamics Laboratory. And that starts right at the top with its director, Neil Holt, and a longtime friend of mine. Neil and I go back well over 30 years to when we were studying electrical engineering together, but now as the director of SDL, he provides great support for the SmallSat conference. So to introduce our keynote speaker today, ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Space Dynamics Lab, Neil Holt.
Pleased to have Gwynne Shotwell with us today from SpaceX, and it's my pleasure to introduce her. Gwynne Shotwell is a native of Illinois and received with honors a Bachelor's of Science and Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering and Applied Mathematics from Northwestern University, where she currently serves on the Advisory Council for Northwestern's McCormick School of Engineering. Ms. Shotwell worked for the Aerospace Corporation for 10 years, doing thermal analysis while writing dozens of papers on a variety of subjects, including conceptual small spacecraft design, infrared signature target modeling, space shuttle integration, and reentry vehicle operational risks. In 2002, Ms. Shotwell joined SpaceX in its founding year as the Vice President of Business Development and built the Falcon Vehicle Family Manifest to more than 70 launches, representing more than $10 billion in business. She's now the President and Chief Operating Officer of SpaceX and is responsible for day-to-day operations and for managing all customer and strategic relations in support of company growth. She's also a member of the SpaceX Board of Directors. In 2014, Ms. Shotwell was appointed to the United States Export-Import Bank's Advisory Committee and the Federal Aviation Administration's Management Advisory Council. Ms. Shotwell has been awarded the World Technology Award for Individual Achievement in Space. She has been inducted into the Women in Technology International Hall of Fame and was elected to the honorable grade of Fellow in the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Also in 2014, Forbes listed Ms. Shotwell as the 90th most powerful woman in the world. Ms. Shotwell may be known to this community and Small Satellite Conference for her leadership in the Dr. Frank J. Redd student competition. During the 6 years she led the competition committee, more than $350,000 was raised for student scholars as part of that committee. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Gwynne Shotwell.
You know, I asked him to just say, this is Gwynne, she's helping out at SpaceX. But I appreciate the introduction. I wanted to let you guys know that the last time I spoke here was 8 years ago, exactly. And it was right after the third Falcon 1 flight, for those of you that recall, third failure. And I came up on stage right afterwards, pretty horrified, of course, and said, we're going to make it. And I think there were probably some negative Nancys in the audience. Maybe still, I don't know. But I'm pleased to be back 8 years later to talk about the work that we're doing, talk about the small satellite market and some of the challenges that we all have in front of us. And then hopefully just give you guys enough ideas to think about. And I much prefer the Q&A at the end of any speech. Frankly, a speech for me is just warm up. And I really like getting questions, making sure that what I have to say here is relevant for the audience. So, I think I'm in charge here. I'm going to talk a little bit about future of launch, especially as it relates for small sats. But I always start out with a video.
BC, start to launch all sequence.
GNC go. Recovery. Landings go. LCLD. Go for launch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So I love our videos. So great. So just to give you a little sense of what I'm going to talk about, primarily it's talking about what I think is the single largest contribution that SpaceX can make to this community and launching in general, and that's recoverability, full and complete reuse of launch vehicles. I think that is it's certainly the only technology that I can think of that's really dramatically going to change access to space, the ability to facilitate enterprise in space. So I'm going to talk a bit about that, and I'm going to show you some more videos too, because I prefer videos over talking. By the way, just so you know, that drone ship, the ship that we land on, is huge. Like, it's huge, and it's so weird to see that it looks so tiny compared to the rocket that lands on it. So that was another good day. We had 2 good days in the past half year or so. So let's talk a little bit about the small sats arena. What I really wanted to talk about was what does the financial picture look like for small sats? How many have we flown? What do the dollars look like? I definitely feel like this is probably a silly community to be cheerleading for small sats, but still, it's nice to know the facts. So in the last decade, a little over 900 small sats were flown. The coming decade, according to Euroconsult, we will fly over 3,600 satellites. And frankly, I think that's an underestimate. Just looking at the constellations that are contemplated right now, you could probably multiply that by a factor of 3 or 4, and still maybe underestimating. So last year, 172 small satellites. This year, some good growth, projected a little over 250. I think the demise of the NEPR program is going to impact this year, but there are lots of other entrepreneurial firms that are trying to build launches to satisfy this community, small and large, by the way. Last decade, spent about $13 billion in financing and venture capital for small sat. Last year, just under 2.4 billion. This year, a little increase, just under 2.6. And I think you'll see that rise pretty dramatically. In fact, getting to 22 billion over the next decade. That's a lot of money flowing to a community, frankly, that I think is quite deserving of the money. I mentioned very briefly that there are lots of organizations that are building small satellite launchers, and even the existing satellite or launch community, SpaceX and others, are looking at how can we host satellites to basically make access to space not the big problem right now, which it is, as you know, for this community. Price point is key for this community. We could not make Falcon 1 work as a business. And so we hope in the 6 or so years since we terminated that program that there's been new lessons learned to facilitate that small satellite launch industry. But in the meantime, big organizations, larger rockets are looking at flying lots of small satellites. We've flown dozens to date, in fact, and we'll be flying many dozens more. I have a pretty interesting mission for the Air Force upcoming that I'll talk a little bit about. Okay, I don't know how much about this I really need to brief. Does anyone not know about SpaceX? Okay, I always put it there just in case. But one of the things that I do want to talk about is what are we doing for the small satellite community, specifically with respect to launch. There's 5,000 of us, and we're really busy working on some of the developments that I'm going to be talking about upcoming. So we really love and appreciate working with aggregators of small satellite missions. In fact, we've got an agreement with spaceflight, a brand new agreement with spaceflight for four additional flights over the next 4 or 5 years that hopefully will provide access, regular count-on access to space, both at the sun-synchronous orbit, maybe other LEO destinations, but GTO as well. I'm sure you'll be able to talk to spaceflight and some of my team here as well to get on the bandwagon, so to speak. So that's really what I wanted to talk about here. And for those who haven't heard me talk in 8 years, we have gotten to station successfully 8 times. We've launched many times successfully. We did, for those of you that follow us, we did have a failure last June, which was really, it was a surreal day. It was a horrible day. The Falcon 1 failures, frankly, were easier because we were learning. And this one, not to say we didn't learn. We learned a lot after that day last June. Happened to be Elon's birthday too, so that really was terrible. Yeah. Maybe we'll ask him to move his birthday a day or 2. But we did learn a lot, and we're back. And that first video that I showed was the ORBCOMM mission, which was our return flight. So talk about piling on. It was a return flight after the first Falcon 9 failure, first and only Falcon 9 failure. It was a brand new rocket. It was an upgraded vehicle, and that's the vehicle that allows us to recover the first stage, basically either fly it back to land or fly it to the drone ship, because we needed more propellant. So we upgraded the engines, we stretched the tanks, and we finally figured out how to use densified LOX and chilled RP to stuff more propellant in those vehicles to give us about a 30% propellant residual to bring those first stages back. And it was really that upgrade that allows us to finally recover stages after 14 and a half years. So this is my flight history chart. I can't wait till I need 100 of these to cover them all. We're little tiny missions, little tiny rocket and Dragon icons, but we're really proud of how far we've come in the 8 years since I was here last. So what is SpaceX doing? And I want to talk a little, obviously, primarily about reusability here, but what are we doing for you guys? We are working with small satellite aggregators, as I mentioned, Spaceflight being the primary one right now. They've been able to gather funding to provide rides for the community. But what else are we doing that's relevant? So, not only does recoverability facilitate more enterprise, because obviously it should allow the rocket to be cheaper. Although not quite as cheap, I was misquoted on our prices for the refurbed rockets, although obviously we'd like to get it as inexpensive as possible, but still a long way to go, and obviously we're going to try to bring back the second stage as well. Maybe that'll take us another 5 years or so to figure that one out. But the key is, don't throw your hardware out after you've used it. Could any of us envision what air travel would look like if you tossed the aircraft after you took off from Los Angeles and landed at LaGuardia? We wouldn't be flying, or not many of us would be flying. So, we always try to apply the aircraft operations mentality here and that framework. And we think it's absolutely critical to make spaceflight ubiquitous. I don't think it will ever be boring. Taking off and landing on an aircraft is pretty boring for me, because I do it a lot. Maybe around the turn of the century or the early decades of this century, it wasn't boring, but it is boring now. So, maybe 50 years from now, space launch will be boring. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the journey that we have on this, because I think this is the single most important thing that SpaceX is working on. Not that there aren't a dozen other important things, but this is the most important. In addition, we have to figure out recoverability. Otherwise, all the trips to Mars that we'll be sending folks on will be one way, and that's not the way we want to. It's not the way we roll. So we got to figure this out. So I'm going to show you our journey. This was the first time we tried to land a rocket on the drone ship. So we failed to land, but that was not a failure. And we had a number of other failures to land, but we learned every one of them. I'm going to show you this again if I can. I love this video. It's a giant rocket careening off the deck there. Yeah. And the ship really wasn't that damaged, surprisingly. But there wasn't a lot of fuel left in the tank, so it was really more like a projectile than a bomb. But I remember I was in the control room in Florida when we hit it like that, and everyone was kind of nervous, like, we didn't make it, was that okay? And I was like, we hit the drone ship, we hit it. Like, how hard, like, that was the hardest part, I thought, when we started out, we hit it. So that was exciting. So, great, this video is working. It wasn't working on my computer this morning, I got a little panicked. This is, I think just a GoPro, frankly, on the top of the first stage. It's kind of fast forwarding, showing what it looks like from the rocket's perspective, what it's like to land. And of course, I still love you, which is really amazing. These videos are all available. I don't know if they're on YouTube or Elon's tweets, but they're so great. Yeah. I have an amazing team this is crazy. This is crazy work that they're doing, really extraordinary. So, what do you do? So we've landed a bunch of these things now. We took the one that really got the most beat up during reentry. It was the JCSat-14 mission. And we've got that vehicle on the test stand, the booster stand in Central Texas. For those of you that don't know about our McGregor site, it's an extraordinary site. You hear rockets firing almost every day, actually. So I turned the sound off on this because it's just 2 minutes of this. But it's still super cool. So what we're doing is we're going to run as many tests on this stage as we can pull off in between doing the production missions that we have to go test on that stand. And hopefully we'll get to, more than 4, but maybe 8 to 10 of these before we go ahead and refly. So it's great that we land. We spent a fortune on Falcon 9 upgrading it so that we could land, but really that wasn't the goal. The goal was to be able to refly it. I'm happy to say we've got a lot of interest. and we may fly 2 of the reflown, the previously space tested, previously flown hardware, previously demonstrated hardware this year, which would be really exciting. So you can see this almost done. This is a full first stage firing here. With the variable load head at the top, we were quite worried about that. Okay, now it's a little bit like watching paint dry. Can I stop it? Yes. All right, so I'm going to talk about Falcon Heavy a little bit for 2 reasons. First of all, I have a really interesting mission called STP-2 that's going to fly on this vehicle. We have STP-2 payloaders in the yay. Sorry we're late. Sorry. This is actually a harder problem than we thought. You know, I'm president, there's 3 rockets, you glue them together. How hard is that? Well, according to my team, it's really hard. So we do want to get that right. But the STP-2 mission is really an extraordinary mission. We're flying over 30 satellites, DSX, 1,200 pounds, some cosmic satellites, actually, 6 of those, I believe, that are about 600 pounds, auxiliary satellites, many auxiliary satellites, 8 PPOS, and then 3 ESPA rings that hopefully are full. This is a giant rocket. You can take a lot of small satellites to orbit with this giant rocket. We are going to be doing backflips on this mission. I think there's 3 separate orbital destinations for these satellites, but it's going to be a very exciting mission. It'll be kind of Q3 of 2017. So hopefully many of you more will join that, assuming we're not completely booked on that flight. But the other thing that Falcon Heavy serves is there should be a lot of extra capacity on this rocket. And hopefully we will fly a lot of ESPA or ESPA-like rings underneath the primary payload to provide regular access for you all to fly. It's not just price that the small satellite community suffers from, it's opportunities. And so hopefully between us and all the other launch providers, there'll be plenty of opportunities. I do believe that there will be plenty of opportunities to fly going forward. So I'm going to show you a Falcon Heavy video, and then I'll come back to why. So that's obviously an animation. We haven't done that yet. that video because you see what the stages are actually doing when we bring them back. We do a flip maneuver, a fly back to the launch site, or get closer back to the coast so you can get to the ship. Do a re-entry burn, and then we do a landing burn. So it's pretty crazy. And the team that's been working on that really deserves a hell of a lot of credit. That's really extraordinary work. So yay, recovery team. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you that Falcon Heavy does have something to do with you all in this community. We've got a ton of launches to do, get executed. We need more launch sites. We are building up Pad 39A right now for Falcon Heavy, as well as Crew. Single-stick Falcon 9s can fly from there. We've got our pad, of course, Launch Complex 40, which has been busy to date and is going to get a lot busier at the end of this year. We're also building a commercial pad down in South Texas, which will be primarily for GTO flights, both Falcon Heavy and single sticks. So in order to accommodate all the stuff we're doing, we've got to have a lot of launch pads and landing pads. Because sending the Navy out for recovery of those boosters it's quite an endeavor, actually. So we're also working on a program called Red Dragon. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I do believe that this and other missions like it are going to provide access to the small sat community for destinations beyond low Earth orbit and GTO. I think Moon Express just did a press release. They got their FAA approval to launch, get to the moon. Red Dragon will probably have space both in the trunk to deploy satellites on the way, small satellites, on the way to Mars, as well as capacity in the Dragon capsule to land. We haven't figured out yet for this 2018 opportunity that we're going to go toss this Dragon to Mars. We haven't figured out how to get stuff in Dragon onto the surface, but we're working on it. I was thinking a jib crane out the top would work, but they keep making fun of me. I don't know, I don't think it's that funny. I think it would work. But anyhow, Mars and the moon, I think, are now going to be quite accessible for the community. And hopefully you guys are all getting excited about that, because there's a lot of work that, by the way, that goes into the satellites that travel to these other destinations. But it's really, frankly, an incredibly exciting time. I think we'll really start to see the solar system open up for small sats. Crew, I have to talk about this, the relevance for small sat. Maybe we'll get some flexibility to fly some stuff in the trunk. Having more astronauts on orbit, I think, will facilitate additional science, which I think will spur the industry as well. But it is just such a cool program. How exciting to think that the U.S. Will finally be able to fly our own astronauts again. And that should happen next year. Really very exciting. NASA has had extraordinary foresight, both in the COTS program, which really was kind of the seed visionary program that facilitated the CRS, the cargo resupply, where we're taking cargo and science to the International Space Station and then ultimately getting to the Crew program. Thanks to Congress as well. I think they've figured out this is an important program and should be funded, but it's just such a cool program. It will be a nerve-wracking day when we put people in Dragon, but we'll be ready. And I think that was it. So hopefully I said enough for you guys to think about some really interesting questions, hard questions. I think the way this is going to work is you gentlemen are going to point people that are raising their hands and get microphones. They're experts at this now, right? All right.
Anybody who has any questions, if I can correct, you have the microphone. Oh, we got to get the microphones first.
You got mine?
Oh, yeah. I can speak up. I have a loud voice. All right. Do you have anything to say perhaps to the undergrads sitting in the room who are just starting to get their hands dirty with small sats and space tech in general?
Yes. I have something to say about everything, so. I just asked my husband. Definitely working on projects like small sats, CubeSats, microsatellites, incredibly important. You have to get your hands dirty, as you say. You have to try these projects while you still have the ability to go back and talk to your professors and talk about what went wrong and hopefully get additional guidance. I did not do much hands-on work in my undergraduate or my graduate career. And frankly, I think I would have gotten a lot more out of my degree had I done hands-on work so that you really apply the principles that you're learning out of a textbook or trying to figure out from a lecture. So super important. Yeah.
So I know Elon is especially focused on Mars, but do you have any plans for cislunar or lunar missions, infrastructure, anything like that?
So we are happy to fly people to the moon. There's a song. We're happy to facilitate transportation to the moon. But we don't have any plans ourselves for a program, kind of a self-funded program there. We definitely have our sights on Mars. That's where we want to facilitate transportation, get people there, and have a settlement. Which, by the way, if we talked about this 15 years ago, we probably would have been institutionalized. Maybe there's some guys out there with my straitjacket as well after this. But it is amazing how the conversation has changed. Now we can talk about Mars and going to Mars, and some people probably think you're crazy, but not everybody thinks you're crazy. Like 15 years ago, people would have thought.
How is rocket engine development going? Merlin uses RP-1, and do you still plan to have Raptor powered by methane? Has that been important to SpaceX?
It's incredibly important. Yeah, the Mars rocket will be a LOX methane system. In fact, we just shipped the first Raptor engine to Texas last night, so we should be firing it soon. Yep.
Hi. Caleb Henry with Via Satellite. Can you talk about any of the progress that you've made with SpaceX's own small satellite program?
The development activity is mostly Elon's. I've got some of my satellite guys here in the show hall. We are working on technologies, small satellite technologies, not for the satellite itself. I mean, we actually are working on some satellite componentry, but mostly on the payload to facilitate a broadband global internet system. I don't have a lot to say about it right now. I'm not fully up to speed on it, frankly, and that's not a big fib. I'm busy with the other stuff. But we do have a team working on it, and assuming we can get the technology right, then hopefully we will deploy a broadband constellation so that you don't have to have crappy internet. Does anyone have good internet? Hands? Does everybody have crappy internet? And it's really expensive. It's like over $100 a month for really crappy internet. So hopefully that will change, either with us or others, but hopefully it'll be us.
Yeah. About the recovery of first stage, it seems that the surface is a little bit burned. Is it okay in terms of structural strength?
The surface, the pad, the landing pad?
No.
The rocket?
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely. The vehicle that you saw in the paint drying video in Texas, that stage has seen three full mission durations so far. We had to take her down because we had a production vehicle that we needed to put on the stand. They come back looking brown or gray, but it's not burned, it's mostly soot, actually, even on the outside of the engines. So we did design the rocket to survive. There's a heat shield around the engines that goes up, but it comes back surprisingly, really surprisingly in good shape. I saw the first one that we landed when I went to the Cape a few months afterwards, and the inner stage, it's real shiny because you build up that composite inner stage on a metal mandrel, so it's really shiny and beautiful on the inside, still shiny and beautiful. Take off the tonneau covers that hold the wiring trays on the first stage, just take those off, and it's pristine underneath. There's no char on the wires, so either it's not that hard, which I think it is that hard, but because it took us 14 years to do it, or we have figured out the way to protect the critical systems. But those engines have fired. We did not refurbish the engines because of the reuse. We did want to change some of the seals on the engine to basically upgrade them to the current version. But those engines, we basically took them off, tested them, and put them back on the vehicle, and are firing them right now.
What's the rough percentage savings, return, refurb, and reflight versus building new?
So we haven't reflown yet, and we're working on the refurb of the first one to refly this year. So I don't have the final answer to that, but it's substantial. Yeah, so, and So you'll read a lot of folks having put their perspective on cost effectiveness of this. And I don't know how things work for their system, but it's going to be good for us and for you guys.
Yeah, perhaps you just answered my question, because I'm really trying to understand why the reusability is the golden nugget, you know, that really makes it cheaper. You know, I mean, there's differences between planes and, you know, launchers, like, you know, the ratio of fuel and, you know, like stresses and so forth that are different. You know, why do other people, you know, there's companies that have talked about, you know, 20% savings or 10% savings if they reuse some of these systems. What are they missing, in your opinion?
Well, I still think 10% is good, right? Well, assuming it's 10% off of our prices instead of prices. But I think any savings that you can get, net savings that you can get, is really important. And I do want to comment on it. It is harder. It is harder. The environments are more stressful. But I think it's really important to not think about how hard a problem is, but to think about, you know, how to solve it. There's a lot of hard problems that we would never go after if you focus on how hard it is. Frankly, when we won the COTS program, you know, the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services program that NASA bid out in 2005 and 2006, we were thrilled we won. We were surprised we won because we hadn't gotten to orbit at that time. But what we didn't want to do is focus on the fact that, you know, the Falcon 9 rocket and the Dragon capsule would, to some extent, be doing the same job that the shuttle was doing. If you think about it in those terms, everyone's like, we'll never make it. But if you think about it, you know, people have built rockets, we're going to build rocket. People have built capsules, we're going to build a capsule. So I think it's really important to think about how you're going to get stuff done instead of how hard it is. By the way, it will be better than 10%.
Orthogonal to that question, and thank you so much for everything you and your team have done. It's truly astounding. But in the tremendous talent we have in the room and in the entire community, the engineering is absolutely superlative. But can you comment on the wisdom of these people adding business and finance and marketing skills to their set so they are able to determine the difference between cost versus value and to be able to evaluate where they're going to take their technical directions, to build their skill sets so they won't be taken advantage of?
Well, I don't have to, because you just did that.
Scientific types can add what seems to be an arcane discipline.
So I do think, by the way, that I think non-engineers should behave more like engineers. And I think to some extent engineers should think about how they communicate. How you might have a great idea, but if you can't sell your idea, then it's going nowhere, and isn't that a shame? So I think it's critical that engineers develop skills that are beyond their engineering. Obviously, you want to be great at what you do, but part of that means you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to sell. You need to be able to understand the cost impacts to make sure that what you're talking about isn't just a really neat solution, but it's a cost-effective solution, and it moves community and society forward. Thomas Edison was very focused on that. He was an extraordinary engineer, obviously an incredible inventor. But he really focused on things that were going to make the world a better place and that he could sell. He was no dummy. He wanted to be able to sell his stuff. And so that's incredibly important from my perspective. So thank you for bringing it up.
You talked about the Falcon 1 business case not closing several years ago. There are several dedicated vehicles under development, small launch vehicles, with in many cases similar price and performance points as the Falcon 1. Has the market changed enough to make a small launch vehicle business case close? Could a Falcon 1 work today?
I don't know about Falcon 1 working today. We certainly couldn't get it to earn its place on the factory floor. Falcon 9 and Dragon were much better products for us to pursue without completely giving up on the small satellite market. I'm hoping that the case has changed enough. Certainly the numbers, both the investment numbers as well as the number of launches has changed dramatically, and that's really what Falcon 1 did not have at the time. You know, I think I'm okay at selling stuff, and I had a hard time selling Falcon 1. The market was just not there, and then when the target market crashed in 2010, it really made that vehicle almost impossible for us to keep going and make money. I mean, we could have still built them and flown them, but the whole point is you want to make money so it's sustainable, so everybody benefits. I believe the parameters in the industry have changed dramatically. There's a lot of folks out there that are competing for that, so I imagine that they know something.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the possible science payloads on Red Dragon, if you have any yet, and perhaps if there's any updated timeline on going from the left picture on your slide to the right picture. Thank you.
Elon had some tweets about that, didn't he? You know, we're working on some payloads, some ISRU payloads, because that's obviously very important in order to make coming back work. Others, I mean, you guys have to put your heads together and think of cool stuff to do. I'm gonna try to get you there, and I'm gonna try to figure out how to get you on the surface instead of just in the capsule. So we're working on that. I think just being on Mars, frankly, is pretty extraordinary. Photos, videos, yeah. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do.
Yeah, I would like to add to the question of Falcon 1, because now that you have the technological edge to recover lower stages and what have you, compared to all the other people entering into the market, do you have concrete plans to reopen small launch activities and around or in the range of Falcon 1 sizes typically?
So no. So for those of you that are building your small launchers, your dedicated small launchers, we're not going to go back to that market. The way we decided we would serve the small sat community is to provide payload opportunities on either complete rideshare missions, which I think, by the way, are the best. When you have one primary payload, they win, right? And there's not as much flexibility for the others, for the secondaries and tertiaries. But I think an entire dedicated rideshare flight is the way to go for us. But no, we're not going to bring Falcon 1 back.
Once you've made it easy to go to Mars, where would you most like to go next?
You know, that's hard. People ask me that all the time. So what's after Mars? It's like, are you kidding me? God, I need surgery. To the beach. Personally, and I'm not saying this is where SpaceX is going, but I want to see, not even missions, I want to see transportation to other solar systems and other galaxies would be great. The new version of Battlestar Galactica, I didn't like the old one. And Firefly are such great shows. And wouldn't that be great to get on a Firefly class spaceship and go to some crazy planet and all those new clothing opportunities and fashion.
So after this very high, it's amazing what you've achieved with the reusability program. Can you tell us what were the 3 key technological advances that made it possible, and what are your next 3 most difficult?
Okay, you mean for recoverability? Learning that parachutes didn't work for us was important, so it's kind of the opposite of technology advancements. It was we just didn't figure out how we were going to get that to work, right? Because we used to have parachutes on Falcon 1. I think building up the capital, the resources, getting back to engineers and financing, getting the resources together for the company to be able to afford that upgrade. It was an enormously expensive upgrade to go from the previous version of Falcon 9, which was 1.0, I think we call it, and the current version that we're flying now since December. We really needed to make those tanks bigger. We needed to stuff more performance or more propellant in the tanks, and we needed to make the engines a little bit more powerful. So that wasn't really 3, but, well, maybe it was 3. Bigger tanks, more powerful engines, and more propellant. So that was really the key. And I do have an extraordinary guidance team, GNC team. As a matter of fact, the gentleman in the white t-shirt in the video that had his arms up, he was one of the primary developers of the capability to get back to navigate back to the land. Not that there weren't dozens of people working on it, but Lars was one of the key guys. So GNC was important. Altimeter technology still, we've got some work to do there, frankly. So maybe that's one of the future ones. Figuring out how to do that on Mars or in variable atmospheric conditions will be important. But that's why I think retropropulsion is really the answer, as opposed to airfoils and parachutes and balloons and those things. I think the atmosphere is so dynamic in other places that makes that much less deterministic. And I'm not sure parachutes are deterministic to start. I'm not saying they're not great technology. I think applying them for us would be hard. So we really like the retropropulsion. In addition, it will scale. Like, we're not talking about dropping 10 tons on Mars. We're going to be dropping hundreds of tons on Mars. Dropping, I mean settling down gently. The anti-sales lady up here.
Hi. There isn't one person in this room who isn't in awe what SpaceX and Elon and you are doing at this point. But Mars, okay. Mars, we've all dreamt about going there. But who in their right minds would want to live in Mars at this point? If you ask me, it's a one-way ticket. And yes, Mars would be accessible, but it would be relatively accessible. It would still cost a lot of money going back and forth. So it seems like it would be a one-way ticket to go there. How do you envision life in Mars within the first few decades? Or what's the monetization for being able to access Mars? Is it mostly government? Is it mostly commercial?
So let me help you out a little bit. Because I need my spaceship back to take more people to Mars, the return trip is free. There are a lot of people on this planet that have a lot of very different ideas. And I'm pretty sure, well, based on the feedback that we get, some crazy, some really very gung-ho. I'm sure there's plenty of people that want to go settle on Mars. It's obviously not going to be easy to start. These people will be true, like the modern day explorers and heroes, really. For those of you that are history buffs, if you look at westward expansion from Europe in the 15th century, that was not an easy trip. Have you guys seen the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria? I mean, obviously not the ships, but the scale versions. They had hundreds of people on those boats, and it was like a little bit bigger than a minivan. But, that was not a first-class ride, even if you bought the first-class ticket. So life was hard then. People were willing to take that chance to go. And as far as, going from red to blue, I don't know how long that will take, but I think it's something we need to focus on. So I only kind of answered your question. And monetize. There are people that want to go. And who in this room would go in the first few? All right, 5%. Jamie wants you to go. Yeah, 5%. 5% of the world's population that's a lot. Especially. Yes, yeah, it was. Yeah.
Hi. So you actually want your spaceship back when going to Mars, but currently your missions have a very short duration, right? Your missions currently are maybe 2 hours or something, so you have very short lifetimes for electronics, for all of that stuff. That's of course very different when you go to Mars, right? There you are a couple of months there. What do you consider to be the greatest challenges that you will have to overcome when designing that?
I think the greatest challenges in the end are not in the technologies of the vehicle themselves. JPL and Lockheed know how to build actually others as well, know how to build electronics that can survive on the surface of Mars. So that problem's been solved. We haven't solved it, but that problem has been solved. So I don't think those are going to be the hardest things. I think the hardest thing will be getting your own fuel from the surface, mining your own fuel on the surface to lift off again. Because the return trip, I think, is really important. It's really important. Otherwise, you toss the ship. We did exactly what I said we don't want to do. Toss the aircraft after leaving LAX and flying into LaGuardia, or if it's on Delta, not. Like yesterday. Of course.
Has SpaceX considered other propellant technologies like hybrids or solids, or is it stretchable even nuclear propulsion?
So we're looking at for liftoff, for booster propulsion, we're liquids people for sure. Solids are not our expertise. I know Gil wanted us to figure out how to jam some solids on a Falcon 1. We're looking at some electric propulsion technologies, certainly for in-space. And hybrids, we're not looking at hybrids, though others clearly are, even for the purpose of Mars. And nuclear, there's a lot of work to do, but I think it holds promise.
Can you give us an update on, or any more on Raptor development? When might we get a video of a test firing?
I don't, maybe, hopefully the next few months, but we just shipped the engine last night. It looks really good. Team worked really hard on it.
So, commercial crew and commercial transportation to the ISS are really cool, and they are happening just now. But the ISS is going away, everyone doesn't want to admit it, but it's only 8 years left. How is that going to affect SpaceX? The ability to put crew could atrophy between then and when you intend to go to Mars.
So I think there's a lot of activity ongoing to find and to create destinations for folks. Bob Bigelow has been working on that for a while. He's flying 3 subscale versions right now. We got Beam on the flight we took up in April, CRS 8. We took up his Beam module. And there are others that are working on destinations. And frankly, the traffic models associated with those are so much higher volume than Space Station right now that I think it's going to be okay. I do believe there'll be a permanent. It's arguable about the station when they'll retire it, but I think by the time they do retire it, there'll be plenty of other places to go. There's a lot of people that are very focused on it and spending a lot of money on it.
Hi Gwen, it's way back here.
Jump up and down. Okay, good one. Thank you.
Hey,
You
Gwen.
jumped. Yes. Hey.
So you had mentioned that, especially when you guys are moving heavy, that you're going to have excess capacity, propellant margin to be able to fly secondaries on those missions. Can you explain your thought or your philosophy on terms of your propellant margin, how you're holding it in terms of reserving some back for return to flight, return to launch base, and then or reserving some for secondary small sat launch opportunities?
Yeah, so we're not reserving the space. It's that if there is space available, hopefully some of these aggregators will have missions that we could consider putting on. The recovery piece is I think it's about 25 to 30% of the propellant, which is why we needed to do that upgrade. So that we reserve for recovery, and then we sell the rest. And because you don't really sell in increments of kilograms right now, at least when you have a primary, the primary buys what they need to get to their destination, and then hopefully there'll be leftovers, and we'll see some small sats flying underneath. I think I said it earlier, but I do want to reiterate. I think dedicated rideshare flights are the way to go. If the primary mission, decides at the end from a risk perspective they don't want to fly anything else, then it's just not it's not as regular a ride. It's hard to count on it. Not to say that it won't exist.
Hi there. So I know that Falcon 9 doesn't have direct geo insertion. You have GTO, but not direct geo insertion. What are you looking into to allow Falcon Heavy to have direct geo insertion in terms of actually extending your mission duration in terms of propulsion?
Yeah, so we're working on the extended mission kit. It's required to be certified by the Air Force. Those are missions that you have to be able to go after. And so we're doing it. Longer life electronics, making sure the propellant is ready to go for those longer missions. Yeah, we definitely plan on it, working on it.
Hi, I appreciated the video you showed of the rocket failing and that you learned from that. How do you encourage your team to take the right risks and accept failure is okay because you learned something?
Yeah, so I think it's super hard to accept failure, right? It sucks, frankly. But it's all about what you do after, how you recover from the failure. That's really important. And the company definitely learned last year about what caused that and about other risk areas that we had on the rocket. It was really important for us to learn, certainly before we put people on top. So we do have a risk-taking culture on the development side. We want to get engines on the stand quickly. We want to get structures on the test stand quickly. But obviously the ability to have failure when you're operational is, like, it goes to zero, right? I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's always really incredibly unfortunate and painful. Frankly, I think my employees they're such extraordinary engineers and scientists that they hate failure. I don't think they feel good about that. So maybe we need to coach a little bit more. I always show that video because we hit the ship. That was success from my perspective for that first go.
To what extent does planetary protection figure into your Mars plans?
Well, it's absolutely, I mean, we won't get a license to fly without making sure we're not harming the ecosystem of Mars. So we're working with NASA, we're working with the FAA to make sure we do the right things there. We're going to obviously try to avoid any areas that are of supreme importance for science as well.
So lower costs are obviously highly desirable, but they're only as good as the elasticity of the demand of the market. What do you think is the actual elasticity? If you drop costs by a factor of 4, are we going to see an increase of a factor of 2 or a factor of 10 in payloads?
Yeah, I can't predict that, but I can tell you that my customers are a lot happier when my prices are lower. And I think that, and I don't mean to be flippant about it, there are missions that we have facilitated due to lower prices. So I don't know the exact numbers, but frankly, I think as momentum grows for lower cost access to space, you'll see more. There's still work to do, but you'll see a lot more.
For us tall people in the room who had our childhood dreams crushed of being an astronaut, I was wondering if you're considering adding extra leg room in your capsule.
So Elon is really tall. And for sure we need to make sure we can accommodate Elon in the capsule. He's very tall. So, yeah, I don't, do I have a SpaceXer here that knows the maximum height? Maybe it's, I'm going to get quoted and I'm going to be wrong, so I will get back to you on that. How tall are you?
6'5".
I was going to say 6'4", but don't crush your dreams. Hold on to them. We'll see if we can squeeze another inch.
Hi. You mentioned the need for better network connectivity. Is SpaceX considering laser communication systems currently?
Yeah, we're looking at laser systems.
Hi. What considerations are being made for long-duration human space flight in terms of the radiation environment, risk of zero-G exposure on the human body?
So we are not currently working on those, I don't even know if you call them technologies, but working on that research. There are lots of organizations, including NASA, of course, that are, and hopefully we'll have the right answers by the time we have the vehicles ready to fly. I don't want to say we're ignoring it. We'd be ignoring the market, but we're just not focused on that. Very important items, though.
Hi. Have you put any thought yet into how you would choose what types of people get to go to Mars first, besides just paying the money?
We've talked about it. We don't yet know what the criteria is. Obviously, they have to have some. They have to pass some basic health, physical and probably mental health screens. But we haven't nailed that down yet. Hopefully, others will have figured out the right kind of screen to do. Yes. Yeah.
All the activity you have at your facility in Texas, how do you keep your neighbors happy with all the noise?
So we are working on a number. Well, the booster stand that you saw there is dramatically quieter. We used to test these stages up on a tripod. And this is much quieter. In fact, a Merlin test, just one instead of 9, which is up about 40 feet in the air, is much louder than the 9-engine tests. We are likely to go away from single-engine tests on Merlin, once we finalize the design and show great decreased variability, I say, instead of greater non-variability. Decreased variability, then we'll just accept and test the engines on the stage. But folks at McGregor that site has been used for this kind of activity since the 50s, and they're quite proud of it, and Texans in general are proud of, doing the hard things and talking about it. And we had a community picnic a couple of weeks ago, and we said, to get to Mars, you got to pass through McGregor, and they liked that a lot. Okay, great. Thank you. You've been a great audience. Thanks very much.
Just before we're on break, I just want to mention one thing on what the foot stop. Neil said this earlier, but Gwynne used to support the student scholarship competition, and at the time she raised $350,000 for a student scholarship competition. She has been a great advocate for the small set cars. So thank you for the And with that, we are on lunch break. We'll be back here at 1:30.